Tyler pulls into the office parking lot every morning at 8:47 a.m. in a matte black BMW X5 he leases for $839 a month on a 36-month term. He doesn't choose the spot for convenience. He chooses it for visibility, close enough to the entrance that the second-floor conference room can see his car during Tuesday meetings. When clients arrive, he makes sure he is the one walking them back to the elevator, timing the exit so the BMW is part of their last impression. He earns $94,000 a year, but his financial position is unstable: credit card debt, a personal loan from last summer, and a $401,000, barely over $8,000. The car is not transportation. It is a signal, a performance of success financed by monthly pressure. Across the same parking lot, Margaret arrives at 8:22 a.m. in a 2020 Toyota Camry she bought used for $22,400 in cash. The rear bumper has a small dent she never repaired because utility does not require cosmetics. She is the head of operations in the same company, earning $112,000 a year, but her net worth sits above $1.1 million. Tyler looks successful in motion. Margaret is successful in structure. Same building, same income range, completely different financial reality built over decades of opposite decisions. One choice is visible, the other compounds silently. The contradiction is not rare, it is structural. In modern corporate America, income and wealth have been quietly decoupled. Two people can earn within the same six-figure range, sit in the same meetings, and report to the same executives, yet live in completely different financial universes. One is liquid, the other is leveraged. One builds net worth, the other builds monthly obligations. Tyler represents the illusion that high income automatically translates into financial strength. But his BMW lease, credit card balances, and personal loan create a system where cash flow is already spoken for before it arrives. Every paycheck is pre-assigned to maintain a lifestyle that looks stable from the outside, but is structurally fragile underneath. A single disruption in income would expose how little margin actually exists. Margaret represents the opposite structure. Her Camry is not a downgrade in capability, it is a reduction in financial friction. No lease obligation, no identity-based payment, no pressure to maintain perception. That difference creates liquidity, and liquidity becomes optionality. Optionality becomes control. The uncomfortable truth is that both individuals are operating under the same cultural conditioning. That success must be visible. One follows it, one ignores it, and the divergence does not appear immediately. It compounds slowly over years, then suddenly becomes irreversible. What looks like a lifestyle difference is actually a balance sheet divergence. And most people only recognize the gap when time has already made correction expensive. The real divide is not income, consumption, or even discipline. It is how each dollar is assigned before it ever arrives. Most people think they are making spending decisions in real time, but in reality, their financial structure has already decided for them. A car lease, a loan payment, a credit balance, these are pre-written decisions that consume future income automatically. What remains is not freedom, but residual cash flow disguised as choice. Wealth, in its most precise form, is not accumulation. It is optionality, the ability to direct future income without friction or obligation. A person with fewer fixed liabilities does not necessarily earn more, but they retain more of what they earn. That retention becomes capital. Capital becomes leverage. Leverage becomes time independence. The car becomes the clearest expression of this difference because it is one of the largest recurring financial commitments outside housing, and yet it carries no productive return. It depreciates on a predictable curve while demanding fixed monthly payments that persist regardless of usage. It is, in effect, a consumption contract signed against future income. Once viewed through this lens, the question is no longer, what car can I afford? But how much of my future am I willing to pre-sell for appearance today? The answer quietly determines everything that follows. The mechanics of this divergence are not abstract. They are measurable, structural, and compounding. A new vehicle in the United States typically loses roughly 20% of its value within the first year and close to 50% within 5 years. That loss is not theoretical. It is embedded into the purchase price at the moment the contract is signed. Yet the financing structure often stretches across 60 to 84 months, meaning payments continue long after the asset has entered its steepest depreciation phase. In parallel, the average new car payment in America has climbed into the mid-$700 range per month, with many households exceeding $1,000 when insurance, fuel, and maintenance are included. For a $100,000 income household, this can represent 12–18% of gross earnings locked into a non-productive asset. Over a decade, that differential compared to a lower-cost vehicle can exceed tens of thousands of dollars in liquid capital. The critical concept is not the sticker price, it is the opportunity cost over time. A consistent $400–600 monthly spread, redirected into broad market index exposure, compounding at historical averages, creates six-figure divergence over a 20–30-year horizon. The asset does not need to perform aggressively, it only needs time. What appears as a lifestyle upgrade in the present becomes a structural constraint in the future. And because depreciation is invisible in monthly budgeting, most individuals never perceive the full economic weight of their decision until the compounding gap has already materialized. Wealth is not built through isolated financial wins. It is built through repeatable constraints that remove emotional decision-making from high-impact categories. In practice, most financial failure is not caused by lack of income, but by unrestricted access to consumption at predictable pressure points: cars, housing, and lifestyle expansion. The first rule is simple: eliminate identity from purchases. If a decision is driven by how it will be perceived, it is structurally misaligned with wealth building. Cars are the most common violation of this rule because they operate as visible status objects rather than utility tools. Second, cap fixed liabilities before lifestyle expands. Once monthly obligations are locked in, they define the minimum income required to feel stable. Every increase in fixed cost permanently raises the baseline. Third, prioritize liquidity over appearance. Cash reserves and investable surplus create optionality, while visible consumption creates dependence on continued income. Fourth, delay upgrades until assets, not income, justify them. Income is volatile, assets are cumulative. Fifth, assume depreciation is a guaranteed tax on impatience. Any asset that loses value predictably should be minimized unless it produces offsetting utility. Sixth, convert extra income into automatic investment before lifestyle adjustment occurs. If behavior changes first, savings disappear. These rules are not designed for optimization. They are designed for constraint. And constraint is what separates perceived financial success from structurally durable wealth. Tyler's BMW X5 lease is structured as a clean monthly number, $839, small enough to feel normal in isolation. But over a 36-month cycle, that becomes $30,204 with zero ownership at the end. The asset never enters his balance sheet. It only cycles through his income statement like a permanent extraction. Add insurance premiums for a luxury vehicle, higher maintenance costs, and premium fuel, and the real monthly burden exceeds $1,100. Over a decade of repeating this pattern, the cost surpasses $120,000 with nothing retained except usage history. Now contrast that with a 2020 Toyota Camry purchased, used for $22,400 in cash. There is no monthly obligation attached to the principal. Over an 8-year ownership window, factoring maintenance, insurance, and fuel, the effective cost averages roughly $350 per month. Even with conservative assumptions, the difference between the two approaches consistently sits in the $450–600 monthly range. That gap is not theoretical, it is investable capital. If redirected into a broad index fund, compounding at 8% annually, even $500 per month becomes over $700,000 across a 30-year horizon. The vehicle choice is no longer about transportation efficiency. It becomes a compounding vector. This is where behavior becomes visible in physical reality. One parking space contains a $70,000 asset that continuously depreciates. The other contains a $22,000 asset that has already absorbed its depreciation shock and is now functionally stable. Both perform the same job, moving a person from point A to point B. Only one quietly converts restraint into future capital. The financial divergence does not persist because people lack information. It persists because the brain is not optimized for long-horizon compounding. It is optimized for immediate feedback, social reinforcement, and reduction of uncertainty. A BMW in the driveway produces instant social validation. An index fund contribution produces no sensory feedback at all. One is visible, the other is abstract. The brain consistently overweights what it can see. This is where identity becomes financially dangerous. When a car is tied to self-worth, any downgrade is interpreted not as optimization, but as loss of status. That triggers a threat response, mild stress activation, heightened cortisol, and an urge to restore perceived social position. The result is predictable. People defend consumption patterns that preserve identity even when those patterns erode net worth. There is also decision fatigue at play. Fixed monthly obligations reduce cognitive load in the short term, which feels like stability. But over time, that stability becomes rigidity. The financial system becomes pre-allocated before conscious choice even occurs. At that point, behavior is no longer active, it is automated. Meanwhile, the absence of visible financial strain in a low-cost vehicle lifestyle creates a paradox. Internally, stress is lower because obligations are smaller. Externally, perception is lower because signaling is reduced. The mismatch between internal stability and external perception is where most people struggle psychologically. They prefer external validation over internal equilibrium, even when the cost is compounding financial pressure. Over time, the brain adapts to its own constraints. High fixed costs begin to feel normal. Lower cost living feels like deprivation, even when it is mathematically superior. This normalization is what locks the system in place, long after the original decision has been forgotten.